Hi, I'm Matthew Ridgway, owner of Good Call Officiating, and I'm here today to talk to you about the security of your O2O systems. Ever since O2Os have come about a few years ago, they provided an effective tool to help us better officiate and administer games. But at the lower levels, they've also provided us some challenges that we may or may not be aware of, especially as they pertain to security. Systems used in Division I and NFL, such as the Riddell and Vocero systems, are excellent systems, but often outside of our price range. And that is the biggest difference between many of the systems available to us. The Riddell systems can cost $17,000 a unit, while the Vocero and Yapalongs are a little bit more modest at around $800 a unit, whereas the FRS radios, also known as walkie-talkies that we typically use, only cost $20 to $60 per unit. And a couple other differences that we're going to discuss today are the licensures, technology, and security of these radios. So what is FRS and GMRS, or as we usually call these radios, walkie-talkies? FRS stands for Family Radio Service. It is a set of frequencies set aside by the FCC back in 1996 for license-free operation, largely for use with families in a broad variety of settings. It is meant to be mobile and to be able to work at that frequency anywhere in the country without interference. GMRS shares the same 462 to 467 frequencies, but it is a licensed operation because it operates at a higher power. So do you need a license? Well, there's a few easy ways to tell. One is, are you using the GMRS network? You can usually consult your owner's manual of your radio to determine what range you're actually working on. If the radio has a removable antenna, you do need an FCC license. Or if you're transmitting at more than 2 watts, once again, you can consult your owner's manual to determine this. The license consists of a $35 fee. It is valid for 10 years, is good for yourself and your entire family, and is available on the FCC website. It is up to you to determine the risk and whether you want to operate without the license. I do not have any knowledge of anyone ever being caught without having one, but especially if you're going to operate near sensitive areas such as airports or military bases, it would be in your interest. Judge that risk for yourself. But again, for $3.50 a year, it is probably just better to get the license and let it be go. And the question might be, why do I want these licenses? Well, you can tell here the difference between the GMRS and FRS channels is most distinct in channel range 15 to 22. And the big difference being operating at 50 watts versus 2 watts. This is a chart that is common of the American radios, which would be the Midlands, Motorola's, and Cobras, as they all share the same frequency settings for channels 1 through 22. And onward for channels that are for radios that have channels that expand that range. You notice the GMRS power is higher than the FRS power in all instances except for channels 8 through 14, which are all constricted to half a watt of power and a 12.5 kilohertz bandwidth. If you go on to the channels that are beyond channel 15 in the GMRS setting, which is the high power setting on your radio, this is going to get you your best performance. This range of frequencies as at this power will help if you have someone who is dropping out, is maybe not coming across very clear, or you're having issues with their range. If you switch to one of these channels, this is where you're going to have the best chance of not having any issues with that on your radio. So that is why you may actually want to pursue a GMRS license, is to get the most out of your radio. When you do go take the FCC GMRS license, well, it's not even a quiz, it's just a application, but you do have to check a box acknowledging that you will not operate within certain frequencies above the line A here on this map. Those 4 frequencies interfere with Canadian operations, and they are listed above. And if you're using a 1 through 22 channel Midland radio, it's channels 19 and 21. If you have expanded channels on your radio, please double check. I know the 467.7 megahertz is the channel 28 on a Midland, but it may vary by radio. So the technological differences between the radios is full duplex and half duplex, and this is a large portion of the cost for the Vocero and Yapalong type of systems. They're what's known as full duplex. Full duplex means you can transmit and receive at the same time. So it's more like being on a phone call or a conference call with someone or a group of people. Whereas half duplex means if your radio is in the process of transmitting, it cannot also receive data at the same time. The other big difference between the Vocero systems is encryption. Encryption is the form of security in which a lot of the systems use. Vocero also operates on more or less an ad hoc wireless network that is set up in the 900 megahertz range and is not on the FRS GMRS bandwidth. But even though it's outside of that range, someone with a scanner could still pick up that radio information that's being transmitted by the Vocero. The difference in the reason someone would not be able to understand what is being said is due to encryption. Encryption is a process in which data taken in is disassembled and rearranged and secured with a password, and the receiving device must have that password to unencrypt it. So the very short way to if you ever question whether you're working on an encrypted system, is do you have to enter some form of a passcode or password for the radio to work? If the answer is no, you are not operating on an encrypted system and your system is not secure. Once again, if you're not entering in a password, your system is not secure. So the Midland radios do have what's called privacy codes on them. And that gives us a false sense of security, I believe, many a times. And this is what makes us think that we do have or do operate on a secure network. Some of the icons here are very familiar to you, and you're all lit up here. Channel 50 here is what this is set on. This HM and L are your power settings, which you can refer back to our discussion about which power setting and which network you're operating on. If you're operating with this power setting to high, you are operating on the GMRS network. But the DCS and CTCSS, which are both highlighted here, are different ways of operating the privacy code. This is more common to how you may see it on your radio. Here's radio with the channel set to 8 and the privacy code set to 38 on the CTCSS system. So once again, the most important thing I'm going to say here today is your radios are not secure if you're using a Midland, Motorola, or any other form of radio. And privacy channels are not private. So CTCSS and DCS are the two different forms of which the privacy codes work. The CTCSS system is an analog system in which a low tone squelch is emitted with the radio, and radios that have the same privacy code setting set to them are listening for that squelch. If it does not hear that squelch, it will not start the reception of that transmission. The DCS uses the digital package that it transmits. For performance on the field, the DCS does have a little bit quicker response time and will give you a better performance than the CTCSS analog system. To illustrate this, I've got two charts here. And the blue boxes represent your radio. The top number represents your channel, and the bottom number represents your privacy code. So in this case, all radios are set to channel 12. The top two radios on the right are set with a privacy code of 6, and the bottom two are set with a privacy code of 3. For the illustration on the left, we can see that the person sitting with this radio over here with no privacy code set can hear all transmissions despite the privacy codes being set for these other radios. So the person on the bottom with the 12.3 setting cannot hear the person transmitting that has got their privacy code set to channel 6, but the person with just their radio set to channel 12 can hear all of this communication. So the reason we get this false sense of security on the field and maybe think that sometimes we have a secured radio is because we do not hear others. And once again, this is the way privacy codes are intended to work. When you're operating with 22 channels or a limited number of channels that you can fit in, and the permitted frequencies between 462 and 467 megahertz, there's only so many options. So if you were at a large event with a lot of people, there would be a lot of people talking to each other. Privacy codes were only set not as a form of security, but they were only set to provide additional options. Whereas you can have, if you had 28 privacy codes, 720 variable options on 22 channels versus only having 22 options if that was the channels you had available. So this person's over here on this right-hand illustration, as they speak, no one hears them at all. And even though that no one can hear them, they still can hear everyone. So once again, your privacy channels, they're there to help reduce traffic. They are not there to give you any form of privacy. They are not secure. They are not encrypted. And even more so, someone who's sitting in the stands with the scan button on can very quickly find what channel you're on. So on the radios, a lot of us that use a form of Midland that does include the ability to use a privacy channel. There are other radios out there that are also I've seen commonly in the officiating community, and that's the Retivus and Baofeng models. These are the lower budget that usually come from Amazon. And there's a warning I will go ahead and put out about these radios. Not all of them are licensed by the FCC, and some of them operate outside of the FRS bandwidth. So double check your radio and make sure it is licensed, especially once again, if you're operating near military bases or airports or anything where radio frequencies are highly important. Failure to do so could result in a fine from the FCC of up to $10,000. That being said, the problem that a lot of people have said is they said the Retivuses and the Baofengs do not work with the Midlands. And that is only partially true. In their native sense, they do not, but there are ways to make them communicate. Once again, if they are FRS radio, they have to share the frequencies that the FRS radios are permitted to. So they must work. So what's going on with those? The Retivus and the Baofengs come in with the privacy codes pre-programmed into their system. And this chart will help you better understand how to work with those who maybe do not have a Midland radio if that is what you're working with. So in this case, I've picked two American brands, the Motorola and the Midland, as well as the Retivus. And as you see with channels 1 through 5, the main channel number matches up with different privacy codes. But after channel 5, there's no correlation whatsoever. Retivus channel 6 is Midland and Motorola channel 18. And you do notice that the American channels do line up with each other. The other thing to note is the Retivus and Baofengs only can produce a CTCSS or analog privacy code. They cannot produce a DCS privacy code. The other thing to understand is sometimes these privacy codes, they are not regulated. They are at different megahertz. And you see that on the Retivus channel 11. And what happens is Midland channel 16 and Motorola channel 16 can hear the Retivus, but because the privacy code is set outside of the range or at a different megahertz than what the Midland channel has available to it, then it cannot actually transmit, and the Retivus cannot hear it on channel 11. The last line of here is to show you there is some discrepancy in some American brands, such as the Motorola and Midlands. In this case, Motorola uses privacy codes 1 through 121, and the Midland uses the separation of CTCSS and DCS. And the way that corresponds is the Motorola channels privacy codes 1 through 38 are the CTCSS privacy codes, and everything beyond that is the DCS. So privacy code 39 on a Motorola is DCS1 on a Midland, and 40 on a Motorola is DCS2 on a Midland, and so on. The last Midland Baofengs or Retivuses, they do have a lower audio quality that is very significant and becomes even more profound whenever you're using it with a higher end radio, such as the Midlands. You will hear the static come through a lot better than maybe you would if you were just using that. So when all possible, I would suggest someone go to a Midland or a Motorola or a Cobra radio Those radios all are about the same level of quality. The Midlands are nice because they have volume buttons. That's a knob on the top as opposed to having to press it. The Motorola is a little bit cheaper per unit, but you should be able to get even some of the higher end Midlands for less than $45 a unit. Personally, I recommend the T51 or the T71 as a unit. So I hope today's presentation is giving you some information to help you understand first and foremost, your radio is not secure in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Anyone sitting in the stands can and probably is listening to you. So keep that in mind when talking to your crewmates and use good judgment about what you're saying. And then I hope it's just giving you some information to help you get the most out of your radios. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions about this presentation or your radios, feel free to reach out to me at my email listed on the screen. Thank you.